Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley. Remember when a movie about bad fish, a traumatized pilot, and an inflatable co-pilot turned the entire disaster genre into one giant punchline and somehow became one of the most influential comedies ever made? Well, that was Airplane. Paramount Pictures released it in 1980, and from the outside, it looked like every other high-stakes disaster movie of the era. You got a troubled pilot, panicked passengers, looming catastrophe at 30,000 feet starring Robert Hays, Julia Haggerty, Lloyd Bridges, Robert Stack, Peter Graves, and Leslie Nielsen, none of whom were actually hired to be funny. And that was the entire point. Now, behind the deadpan one-liners, the background gags that you missed the first 3 times, and the rapid-fire punchlines that didn't stop long enough to let you breathe, Airplane had a production story almost as ridiculous as the movie itself. And today, we're going to count down 15 weird facts that you didn't know about Airplane. And stick around for number 1, because this movie almost never made it to theaters at all. And as you make yourself comfortable around the cabin, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps YouTube know that you love the nostalgia deep dives of your favorite movies. All right, fasten your seatbelts. Let's prepare for takeoff. Number 15, the movie they accidentally recorded. Now, one of the funniest movies ever made exists because somebody forgot to turn off the VCR. But that's not a setup. That's the actual origin story. Jim Abrahams and Jerry and David Zucker, who also go by Zaz, had a habit that they called signing for fish, leaving a VCR running overnight to capture whatever strange late-night programming aired, and then they would mine it for parody material for their stage show Kentucky Fried Theater. One night, the tape grabbed a dead-serious 1957 disaster film called 0 Hour. They couldn't stop laughing. The premise was completely straight-faced. A traumatized war veteran has to land a passenger plane after the crew is incapacitated by food poisoning. Every line was delivered with total sincerity. Every dramatic beat was begging for a punchline. And so the trio did something pretty genuinely insane. They used 0 Hour structure as a blueprint and started building jokes directly into the existing framework, which is why watching both films back-to-back feels kind of surreal. The hero's name, Ted Stryker, S-T-R-Y-K-R, becomes, well, Ted Stryker, S-T-R-I-K-E-R. The food poisoning crisis gets transformed into Airplane's infamous bad fish scenario. Lines like sluggish like a wet sponge are heavily inspired by 0 Hour's dialogue. Sluggish like a wet sponge. Sluggish like a wet sponge. With the jokes turned all the way up. And then it became clear this wasn't a parody anymore. This was a remake. And in Hollywood, that's the kind of sentence that can end with lawyers. So, the trio tracked down the owners of 0 Hour, and they bought the official remake rights outright for $2,500. That payment became a legal force field. Characters, staging, dialogue, all of it suddenly theirs to use freely. Airplane went on to gross over $171 million worldwide and redefine movie comedy entirely. That $2,500 may be the best bargain in Hollywood history. Number 14, the casting gamble that made Airplane work. Now, when the Airplane script landed at Paramount, studio executives had a very clear vision for Ted Stryker. You get a big comedy name, CHVY Chase, Bill Murray, some of the audiences already knew was funny, but Zaz said absolutely not. The search for Stryker produced some genuinely surprising additions. Bruce Jenner reportedly read for the role, but the directors wanted someone with more of a slightly shell-shocked, awkward quality that didn't quite fit the heroic pilot angle that the studio had in mind. David Letterman screen tested for the part. Zaz liked him enough to want a second audition, but Letterman decided that the role wasn't for him. Even the great Barry Manilow was actually pushed by the studio, but Zaz, they wanted no part of him. According to production accounts, a sympathetic Paramount exec ran interference, calling Manilow directly and emphasizing just how inexperienced the directing team was, essentially talking him out of the role on Zaz's behalf. Those finalos, I tell you. And then they found Robert Hays. Earnest, a little nervous, capable of delivering complete nonsense with total conviction. And for the cherry on top, he actually was a licensed pilot. That role was his. I flew single-engine fighters in the Air Force, but this plane has 4 engines. It's an entirely different kind of flying. Now, the search for Elaine had its own complications. Sigourney Weaver, fresh off Alien, reportedly considered the role, but eventually passed, possibly put off by some of the script's more crude moments. Shelley Long also circled the part before Julia Haggerty walked in and completely immediately won the room. One audition, zero hesitation, role locked. The near misses list for Airplane reads like the world's most unexpected casting call. Number 13, the Maestro of Mischief. Now, Leslie Nielsen spent 30 years being taken seriously. Then he discovered the fart machine and he never looked back. The device was a small handheld noisemaker. The exact origin is a little murky, though, with accounts ranging from an Oklahoma craftsman to a favor from the Paramount prop department. What's not in dispute is what he did with it. On the set of Airplane, Nielsen would deploy it mid-con conversation and continue speaking like absolutely nothing had happened, leaving cast and crew scrambling not to break. Robert Hayes said Nielsen played that thing like a maestro. And Nielsen never wanted to keep a good thing to himself, eventually started selling them to the crew for $7 apiece. It got so out of hand that the assistant director eventually banned them from the set entirely. Now, Nielsen obviously ignored this in a way that only a man with a fart machine in his pocket could by taking the act everywhere. Press junkets, interviews, dinner parties, elevators. He reportedly even deployed it at the White House, on a flight in first class, and virtually on every talk show he ever appeared on. It was always the same move. Straight face, zero acknowledgement, total commitment. Although I will do almost anything I can for a laugh. The joke became inseparable from his legacy right up to the very end. Nielsen's tombstone reads simply, "Let her rip." He spent the next 30 years making sure nobody could take him seriously, and he left specific instructions to make sure that it stayed that way. Number 12, the heckle that came straight from real life. Now, the moment a 10-year-old passenger casually roasts Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the cockpit might be the most unexpected trash talk in movie history. But it wasn't random. By 1979, Kareem was already one of the greatest basketball players alive. Multiple MVP awards, a dominant center for the Lakers, but critics sometimes accused him of coasting a little bit during the regular season and not giving full effort on defense. So when Joey leans forward and delivers the "my dad says you don't work hard enough on defense and that you don't really try except during the playoffs, I think you're the greatest, but my dad says you don't work hard enough on defense." The joke lands really hard because it echoes exactly the kind of criticism that Kareem occasionally heard from sports media. But Kareem's comeback, tell your old man to drag Walton and Lanier up and down the court for 48 minutes. That wasn't random either. The great Bill Walton and Bob Lanier were two of the most physically punishing centers in the league. This scene gave Kareem something that he rarely got publicly, the last word. According to some retrospective accounts, the role was actually intended for one of my favorite athletes of all time, Pete Rose. But filming conflicted with the 1979 MLB season, leaving the co-pilot seat open for the 7 feet 2 inches Lakers center instead of Charlie Hustle. And Kareem's salary negotiation deserved its own entry in Hollywood history. Zaz offered him $30,000, and then his agent came back asking for $35,000. And the reason was very specific. That was the exact price of an Oriental rug that Kareem wanted to buy. An art piece, not one to walk on. Zaz assumed it was like a creative bargaining tactic, but they agreed, half amused. And then a few weeks later, an article in Time magazine ran a photo of Kareem standing in front of the rug he'd already purchased with their money. He got the role, he got the rug, and he got the last word on defense. Not a bad day's work for a co-pilot. Number 11, the joke a-minute blueprint. Film historians often estimate that Airplane crammed somewhere around 260 jokes into its 88-minute runtime. That's roughly 3 per minute, which means that Zaz had a precise engineering mindset. They weren't satisfied with funny. They wanted relentless. Their philosophy was simple. Keep the audience laughing so relentlessly that nobody has time to question how completely insane the story is. And the solution was laying. While one joke lands in the foreground, something ridiculous is already happening behind the actors. Background signs, visual gags, passengers doing things that nobody on screen acknowledges. You miss one punchline and another is already on the way. The film was deliberately designed to reward repeat viewings with new details revealing themselves every time. The film practically demanded a second viewing and then a third because there was always something that you missed. And some of the cleverest jokes weren't even visible. For example, throughout the entire film, the plane on screen looks like a modern jetliner, at least for back then. But you see us now. You should be able to see the field now. The sound that you hear, that's not a jet engine at all. It's a rhythmic chug of a propeller aircraft. And that sound was lifted directly from 0 Hour. A hidden callback to the film's origin story baked into every single aerial shot. Now your eyes see a modern jet, and your ears, they're here in the 1950s. It's the kind of detail that most viewers never consciously register. Our brains automatically fill in airplane sounds when we see a plane on screen. But aviation buffs, they eventually caught it. Film historians noted it. And once you hear it, you absolutely cannot unhear it. The perfect airplane joke hidden in plain sight, quietly humming underneath the entire movie.